We have one last presentation before the inside show is done, and we're going to go back outside underneath the tent. I want to encourage people to stay. We almost have an extra 2 hours outside, be able to meet the manufacturers, talk to them a little bit more, see their products, and we're going to have we have a happy hour. So if you'd like to get a cold beverage, enjoy yourself out in the sunshine, that'd be great. So the last presentation we're going to do is the first time we've ever done this. We're going to bring up 4 different construction managers from Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois, and I'm going to introduce them to you. They're going to give you a little bit of bio of themselves and then their company, and then we're going to let them talk a little bit about we at Pauly Jail like to call it design assist, where a construction manager goes out, does his research based on qualification, interviews 3 different mechanical, electrical, plumbing, masonry contractors, DECs, then picks the right one, puts together a team. So they all have different names for it, but let me go ahead and bring them up here one at a time. Leanne Skuse from River City, out of Illinois. Larry Weigand from Weigand Construction, out of Fort Wayne. Rob Train from Michigan. Did I forget the 4th one? Oh yeah, Paul Okeson from Garmong. You knew that was coming, didn't you? All right, you know what? All right, so let's just start with, Leanne, I'll start with you since you're the closest. All right?
Yeah, it's right behind him. Next.
All right, I'm going to read a little bit of your bio. Hopefully it's honest. All right. All right. River City Construction Company was founded in 1984 on the guiding principles of providing quality projects that are completed safely, on time, within budget, and are performed with an uncompromising commitment to customer satisfaction. River City completes on average $275 million in commercial building construction per year. As president, Leanne Skuse is responsible for all aspects of River City construction, but more importantly, serving the people and the teams that drive the success of their clients, trade partners, affiliates, communities we serve, ultimately the organization as a whole. With River City's purpose as her primary focus, Leanne continuously strives to create environments that enable people to do extraordinary things in work and life for her teams, her clients, her trade partners, and her communities. Now I can tell you this, Leanne's only been president since what, 2016, right?
2020.
2020. All right. Well, we personally at Pauly Jail have been working with River City since 1987. So I think you're probably the oldest construction management general contracting firm we've worked with. Had a lot of great time, a lot of great years. Next up is Rob Train with Granger Construction out of Michigan. Let's see. Hold on. A lot of 5 cars. All right, Granger Construction is a family-owned company founded in 1959. The company has experience across multiple market segments, including corrections, healthcare, industrial, and more. Rob Train currently serves as Vice President of Operations. Rob has over 25 years of industry experience servicing government and agency clients throughout Michigan and Ohio. He has delivered projects utilizing a number of delivery methods, including general contracting, construction management, design build, and integrated project delivery. Rob received a Bachelor of Science from Michigan State in construction in 1995. Next up is Larry Weigand. Do I even have to read this, or can I just tell him what I know? Huh?
Not everything.
I'll read it then. All right. We've known Larry almost as long as we've known River City. So Larry grew up around construction. He began working summers in the field as a laborer. Upon college graduation, he worked as an estimator and project manager, learning the operational side of the business. In 1992, he became president and owner of Weigand and embraced the opportunity to continue the legacy of a construction company by his great-grandfather. Weigand traces its roots back to 1906 when stoneman Henry Weigand began installing and repairing many of Fort Wayne's brick sidewalks. 4 generations later, Larry Weigand has led the company to annual revenues of more than $300 million and positioned as one of the premier builders in the Midwest by expanding operations into Ohio, Illinois, and Michigan. And last, Paul Okeson from Garmong. That doesn't have any, oh, there it is. All right.
There's nothing to say.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's see. I've known Paul probably the shortest amount of time. We've only been working together for what, 6, 7 years now, something like that?
Yeah.
It's been a great relationship. So Garmong offers nearly a century of construction experience, and today is one of the leading construction management companies in Indiana. Design, build, and general contracting services are second nature to Garmong. Paul joined Garmong in 2015, and as president brings business and corporate development experience along with project execution experience from previous work in the construction industry. He's well versed in the public, commercial, and private sectors. Okay, so that's the introduction of who these 4 individuals and their firms are. What we'd like to do is, I'm going to go ahead and ask some different questions that have already been sent in. What I'd like you in the audience to do, and those watching at home on the webinar, all right, if you have any questions on what's design assist, or they're all going to call it something different, but we talked about it earlier today of how you should pick a team. And that starts with, you need to pick the architect and the construction manager, but it's a lot more complicated, as some of you are already experiencing. It's a lot more difficult to actually pick the right construction manager than to just talk about it. So with that, you want to go ahead and just get some questions? Does anybody in the audience have any questions for them starting off?
You can tell this is the highlight of the day. They've all been waiting for this opportunity.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay. I got a question for Rob Train from Granger. Rob, how do you select design assist contractors on your projects?
Well, we pretty much follow the same process or a similar process that you would follow to hire a construction manager. So it's very much qualifications based. We receive a qualification packet, review that, and then we send out a request for a proposal. And so, there's a few elements that I think that we put together in our process. One, the team, who's specifically going to be on the project, the past experience of the company, their safety and record, of course, their financial stability, experience, and then we ask for a few different price components. In our case, we try to bring our design assist partners on early in the design, or usually about the design development phase, so when design's about 50% complete, to help us with making sure that the pricing is correct, as well as get a jump on procurement for long lead items. And so on the pricing side, what we ask for is a lump sum for pre-construction services, which is their time invested into helping with that estimating process. And then we ask for labor rates and overhead and profit fee and any other markup such as insurance or bonding that would be applied to a sort of a guaranteed maximum price when we complete the design of the project. And then from there, it's open book estimating until we can get to a point where we reach a GMP, which usually, if we're a construction manager at risk, we're, in turn providing a GMP to our client at the same time.
Does anybody on the panel have a different opinion on how you guys do the same version of that? Larry, Paul,
Very, very similar to what Rob said. One thing that we do in addition to that, and I don't know if you do the same, is we have an escape clause in the contract just in case they miss on anything of their deliverables or if we can't come to final contract. So I think that's important too, is to make sure that, hopefully you've done your due diligence starting out, but if you don't get to the end product that you need, the project needs that there is an escape hatch for the contract.
Anybody else? All right, I got a question for Leanne.
Wait, hold on, you got a question
Oh,
on
we have
the
a question. I'm sorry.
audience.
My
So
glasses.
the question, you guys were talking about coming to 50% regular on your team. How do you deal with the architects having the design to start with, and by the time you get to a 50% budget, to build it, you're outside the budget, you're outside the GMP you're targeting. So can you talk about your process for setting the budgets up for the owner during that design process as it's beginning?
I can speak to that if you guys don't mind. So River City, we are a self-perform contractor, so we regularly not only compete in the design build alternative delivery world, we also competitively bid on many, many projects. So when we do that, we utilize that information, historical information, to help guide us on those budgets. And when we put that information together, we're utilizing the drawings and we're actually doing a complete takeoff as we go through that process. Sometimes that's not how the budgets are initially developed with the design teams. Unfortunately, sometimes there's a lot of unit pricing that happens in that space, and that's where the budgeting process can go extremely awry from the get-go because you need to have that accurate information and a true quantity takeoff is what we call it in our world with those estimates and a full understanding of what exactly is in that scope. And with that information, that historical information, we can help guide all those milestone budgets as we move forward. So throughout the course of our GMP process, we have Eric is one of my partners out here in the crowd, and he's the one that actually does all of our estimates for us. Eric, how many have we actually gone over budget on and come back in line? Very few. Because of that, because of the amount of effort that goes in on the very front end of the project, because it helps guide all the way through the overall milestone budgeting process.
I would add to that too, and I think to the basis of your question and if I would sort of impart anything that I could give to the audience is the importance of having your construction manager, identified and brought on board really at the beginning of design is pretty critically important in my opinion. The ability to manage the budget, the ability to be involved in, as Joe calls it, a design assist role, as you're starting out in design it's been our experience, is critically important to holding the budget, to getting your accurate information put in. There's a phrase that one of our operations director has that if you make a change in the beginning of the design, it costs you $1. If you make a change at the end of design, it costs you $100. But if you make a change out in the field, it's $10,000, right? So the cost effectiveness of being involved in the design process at the beginning as a construction manager is really going to save a ton of money and create greater efficiency and give you a more accurate budget. And you're managing expectations all the way through the process. So the key point is have your construction manager involved at the outset of design, and your ability to realize success will go up tenfold.
And I think the historical data is very, very important. Making sure that you have a construction manager that has similar history with very relevant projects in the relevant region. In addition to what Leanne said, I think the sooner you can get to quantities, so that if there is a change between SD and DD, you can set the pace for what has changed, why it's changed, if it's a want or a need, and you can come back to original design intent and the quantities, and then revamp.
I have a question. It's not even one of the written questions that have been sent in, but let me ask you guys a question. As your 4 different companies, all right? Do you find it to be more beneficial for the owner to get the right architect for you to be able to work with? I mean, because I can just tell you, we've had some situations where the county picked an architect and then they picked the CM, and they just never got along. I mean, it was just like cats and dogs the whole time, and well, Rob, I'll just bring it up. Alpena County, Michigan, prime example, all right?
Not to name names or anything.
Yeah. I won't even name
Is
the
the architect out there? Is the architect out there?
Okay, but I mean, would you guys kind of give your opinion on what you think about that? Because I'm sure you've all had it, right?
Sure.
You've gotten the wrong architects with the wrong CMs.
Yeah, paramount, I mean, to deliver any project, regardless of how you're delivering it, CM, whatever, the most important thing is communication. And communication, you got to have trust, you got to have, professional courtesy and respect for one another. So, it is very important as you're bringing together at least the owner, architect, and CM team to begin with, to take that into consideration, like how well the team works together, is our chemistry together. In fact, we've had some clients that, through the interview process, try to put together a little bit of a dialogue with, thoughts and ideas about how we might deliver the project, just so you can see how those teams interact with one another. So, very key to delivery of a project.
Yeah, I would add to Rob's comments. You know, we have several of our partners in the audience today, and you know, if you're being sincere about your experience, nobody bats 1,000, right? Everybody's got a project that they wish they could go back in time and do a little differently, but there's usually one of really three reasons have been my experience as to why a project doesn't go as well as you'd want, and one of those is definitely having an architect and a construction management firm that have never worked with each other before. Doesn't mean it's not going to go well, but certainly that creates an element of potential risk that unfortunately can be injurious to the client. So, you know, the opportunity, and I think what's important about this particular seminar and these groups, I'm honored to be up here with these three other companies because, you know, if I'm not going to do your job, any one of these companies do your job, you're going to be in good hands. But I can't say that about everybody who doesn't have that experience. But bringing some folks on board, you know, and having a team that works well together certainly, I think, is a huge benefit to a client.
The word we like to use is transparency back and forth. Transparency in the process that the CM has, transparency in the process that the architectural firms and the engineers have too. And we like to kind of define what that means going in.
Yeah, piggybacking off of all three of you guys, construction is hard. It's a difficult industry, and you regularly get yourselves into a jam. And so what better way than to get out of that jam when you're with your teammates that you trust wholeheartedly to help solve those problems. And so that open book transparency, that trust, communication, we say it regularly, communication, collaboration, and cooperation between all those parties, and you're going to have a successful project.
For any or all of you, obviously we all are aware of the price escalations, the post-COVID supply chain issues, and now the Russia-Ukraine issues. Are you working into your pricing agreements with your clients any index-based pricing? We don't know when they're going to be over as a manufacturer, but it's kind of hard for us on one end to do we guess worst case? Has that been a discussion you've had with your clients? We can work in an index-based price system.
Mike, I think this idea of index price based booked into your projects is an absolutely great idea. It's very fair. Price escalation in the past year is something that we've all struggled with. You hear about it every day in the news in various industries and products. What we have been doing so far has been, we look back, I guess, at the escalation in our corrections projects over the last 3 years. I think we came up with like 17% escalation in just those type of projects. So we're trying to, in our estimates right now, we're carrying transparent budgets for escalation, and we're changing those and monitor those all the time. We're trying to take place and host some discussion forums about escalation. What I'm really concerned about, though, is as we try to be transparent and escalate that, account for escalation in our estimate to protect the owner and protect the budget, is the risk that gets pushed down to other subcontractors and how they manage that, and maybe a less of a transparent situation. And the danger I see in that a little bit is that if I'm just a trade contractor, let's say a painting contractor, and I have to account for escalation in some manner, and all my competitors do as well, it comes down to who has the lowest amount of escalation in their number that you don't know about, and how much money are we spending to cover risk that we can't predict. And so this idea of indexing based off some major indices is I think a great idea to say that this is what our material price is based on today, and we can move it up and down when it comes time to procure the work.
All right, we're going to take the next question then. All right, so this is directed to Larry Weigand. Larry, do architects and engineers like the design assist method? And it seems like it could get messy in identifying who's responsible for different elements of the design and the construction.
I think the short answer is yes. The design assist, I think, really helps the entire process. I think one thing that's really important for a CM like ourselves is stay in our lanes. What we want to make sure is they're responsible for the design. We want to come alongside with our design assist partners and make it a better process. We want to talk about means, methods. We want to talk about our experience with like materials, whether they're the ones specified or maybe provide alternatives. What it also provides with the design assist is it brings some certainty and predictability if we're alongside for expediting long lead items. If we have the opportunity to do that because we are on board and we can give hot lists on what we see as long leads in the industry, I think design assist brings the ability to help expedite, especially in today's environment.
All right. Are there any questions to those responses anywhere out in the audience? Melissa, you have one?
I got one from someone online watching the webinar. This is a question for the entire panel. What are your collective expectations for material costs going forward in 2023? And what about labor availability?
Do you have a crystal ball?
I'll just start and say we're asked that all the time. I mean, every RFP, every interaction we have with a client, we're asked that. And one thing I can tell you is whatever number we give or whatever process we give, it's going to be wrong. It's either going to be high or it's going to be low. So what we like to do is tie it back into what we see with major indexes. We want to make sure that we, because one of the worst things you can do is be way too high and escalate the project out of existence. And so what we want to make sure is there's a great method to how we come up with escalation. Again, it is a tough market right now. There's some things up in double digits, some are staying in the lower single digits, but in aggregate, you have to look at what type of materials, what type of how much labor is on the job, and take everything into consideration. It is a science, and it's one that we're getting really good at, but we still don't have the crystal ball. We don't have the magic BB.
I agree with everything that Larry just said, and this is not a sales pitch. We're all here at this conference trying to educate ourselves, learn a little bit more about this process, but I'll go back to something Mike Smith said in his presentation. We all want to build the best product at the right price for your community, but what you don't want to do is lose focus of quality and focus on just the lowest price, right? I mean, as Mike said, you don't want to be somebody's guinea pig. There's a lot of product, and so the detention portion of a jail project makes up about 30-35% of the total budget. The rest is four walls and a roof, administrative space, kitchen area. But that's a very specialized. That 30 to 35%, based on the things that you saw in Joe's presentation, is a pretty volatile market. There's a lot of consolidation and a lot of reduction in qualified manufacturers and suppliers. So don't get seduced in this current marketplace where prices are soaring out of control to try and look for some creative path and go with someone that's not been tested or tried out on a job just so you can try and work some money out of the deal. Our experience would tell you that you will regret that. And given that it's a public works project, and let's face it, it's not a popular one. No one's showing up at your public meetings demanding to spend $50 million on a new jail, right? After they cross over 50 potholes on the way to the meeting. So it's not a popular project, but doing it right is critically important. And I'd like to point out, too, that no one knows this better than our past president of the Indiana Sheriff's Association, Brett Clark, who's sitting in the second row here, who just went through, or is going through and finishing up a fairly sizable county jail project, and really made the determination early on to go with the suppliers and the manufacturers that he knew, and did his own personal investigation on to make sure that the quality was there, the longevity was there, and that the return on investment for his county's jail was realized. I mean, and I think that's an important part of it. So, no, we can't predict what the costs are going to be, and 90% of our job, though, is managing your expectations as you consider building a project. And so don't go with someone that hasn't done it before, would be my advice if you want to keep things under control.
So along with that, it's also important to take into consideration just the construction industry as a whole. It's booming right now. So not only the detention industry, the corrections industry, but clients are wanting to build, and they're not building small facilities right now. They're building very elaborate facilities. Their capital expenditures are very high right now, which is also compounding the supply chain issues, adding to the cost of the escalation because there's, the material availability just isn't there. So that's where the design assist model becomes extremely beneficial from a standpoint of, especially with the detention equipment market that Joe was talking about, with everything being consolidated down into very few vendors. They have an eye on the market. They know what's happening. They know the different projects that are coming down the line that are these massive scale projects similar to the Franklin County project, and having access to the availability of those different materials within those market sectors is going to be key to making sure that, one, you understand the project budget, but then two, also understanding the schedule. We have projects right now that are a 12-month project, but it's a 65-week lead time to get an air handler. So how do you make that happen? So just making sure that you have that line of sight on both the budgeting, the cost of the materials, and the schedule and the availability of those products is going to be a tremendous value to the overall team.
I mean, paint is a lead item now.
Right.
So
Roof fasteners. You can't get the roof fasteners.
But what I can say is from a design or design assist, if you can get your CM to identify some of these long lead items for early release, early bid and release, I think that'll be key for trying to bring some of those very long lead items back within a project schedule. So I think that can be very helpful to at least get them within the overall duration.
that's a great point.
Any other questions? All right, well, this question was addressed to Rob at Granger, but I think it could go across the board. The question is, how involved does the Sheriff's Department need to be during the planning and construction of the new jail?
So I pointed out to Gary, I sat next to Gary during the interview or the presentations earlier, and I noticed from the two presentations, both the takeaway was the Sheriff's Department needs to invest some resources into being actively involved in that design and construction period. And I know that you guys are all strapped for resources and stuff like this, but I talked about communication earlier, just to have those eyes and ears from that department. And, depending on the size of the project, it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-time position, but we've had projects in the past that have that dedicated resource, and it's just that person that we can go to. What's important for them, I think, is, I appreciate the people from Franklin County talking about we're outside of our wheelhouse, and, everyone in that position would be. But you know how the facility operates, and when you hear something, you can at least say, hey, that doesn't sound right, or I see this happening, what's going on? And so I think it's key that the Sheriff's Department is or operations of any nature is included in the whole entire process.
Yeah, I would add to that too, and I'll pick on you again, Sheriff Clark, but the more involved, so our experience has been the more involved that the sheriff or his designee or her designee is in the project early on and throughout is directly relational to how well the project goes. It's your house, we're turning the keys over to you after it's done being built. You got to live in it and operate it, and if you're not a part of it along the way, it typically ends up being a product that you probably aren't going to like too much.
All right, the next question is, it's actually directed to River City, but once again, I think it's a question any one of the four of you could answer. Leanne, why should a client or design team consider a design assist approach or an alternative delivery method, design build, CM at risk, when planning a new detention or correctional facility?
I think we've all kind of talked about this already, but from my perspective, this was the world that I lived in prior to my current role. I regularly chased projects that were utilizing the alternative delivery approach, so I'm very much, that's my affinity as far as the delivery models. But from that standpoint, I think we've all hit on it, that collaborative process is key in this industry currently right now. And it's going to be key for a very long time moving forward until we get out of some of these weird supply chain issues that we're currently dealing with. But Also along those lines, not only our world, not only the construction world, but your world, as far as the workforce and the availability of manpower in the construction industry, but then also in the detention market as well. How can we help design facilities and construct facilities that ease those manpower issues that you might have? How can we help design and construct facilities that are protecting your staff, that are protecting the inmates, that are protecting the patients of any of the mental health facilities that we're involved with? Those are all key pieces and parts of a successful design assist project. And as we've mentioned, especially with all the security equipment and the manufacturing world that's out there, it becomes an integral part of an overall team.
Joe, I wanted to talk. You mentioned integrated project delivery, and so there's a contract form called integrated project delivery. It's recognized by the AIA. It's recognized by the Consensus Doc, which are the two primary authors of contracts for the country. What's unique? We've done 2 correctional projects in this manner. What's unique about it is the owner doesn't hire an architect and then hire a construction manager, and the contractual relationship is kind of back and forth. The parties form a team and they all sign the same contract, and so contractually, it's kind of set up already for collaboration. Few observations in our experience of that is one, that's nice, but in well-run projects, no one wants to look at the contract. We can just kind of get along and work together, and so the concept, it's nice. But what it does do is it kind of builds the structure for how you're going to collaborate and work together, and I think that really shows a commitment of the teams. And when we deliver that way, the cost of the work and all this stuff is very transparent. And when you bring on the detention equipment contractors and other trade partners, I think that they have a vested interest in the success of the project, and they work with the team a little bit better. And then the other thing I wanted to say about this alternative delivery method of IPD, which in my opinion is fairly new in the industry, given how slow we move sometimes, is that if you engage in this type of delivery process, it's important to stay committed to the constructs of how you're going to work together and not fall into the trap of falling into our old roles, meaning I'm the architect and I'm going to draw and you build what I say, and I'm the construction manager and everything, I'm going to pass my wrist to a sub. You have to remain engaged and hold each other up in the process, but it's an incredibly rewarding way to deliver projects.
If I could just add to that, I agree with the IPD, but we've delivered, and I think everybody probably has delivered IPD, CMA, CM at risk, GC, design build. We've all done it, and it comes down to accountability of the team and knowing your roles and responsibilities and collaborating, having that transparency. So again, you can pick all different delivery methods, and it comes down to the experience, kind of the integrity of the people that are across the table or working with you. So I think that's really important, is the experience, the integrity of the team, and how they're willing to get to the end goal for everybody. So again, we all have our favorites, and I think CM at risk is fantastic. IPD in certain situations are great delivery, but it comes down to the people and the process at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's important to note, too, there's people from different states here, and different state statutes on public works govern these delivery methods a little bit differently in each state, and so educating yourself about that's pretty important. I think to your question, though, Joe, about design assist, I would encourage you to take advantage of some of these other delivery methods, and maybe, I don't want to say that the old-fashioned hard bid way is not the right way to go, but you lose a lot of that front-end collaboration and teamwork and design assist. It's kind of like Christmas, right? You don't know what you're getting until you open that box on bid day and see what's in it. And you might be pleasantly surprised, or you might run for the hills, right? So you miss an opportunity with some of these other delivery methods to have that upfront collaboration during the design process, which can be critical to managing your expectations on budget and having the right team members delivering your project for you.
We have a question out in the audience. Over there.
Thank you.
In response to the supply chain issue, I think Leanne gave the example of a 12-month construction budget, a 65-week lead time for air handler. Larry, you mentioned something that I maybe should be familiar with, but I'm not. I think you said something about early bid and release as a strategy to contend with that. Can you elaborate and help me out with that?
Sure. Yeah, it would be a partnership with the design team, and if you have a CM on board, if you get to CDs or at least to specifications on certain long lead items, you can put early bid packages out. So what you can do is procure those, have those secured, bid, and got those locked in with delivery dates prior to having completion of the rest of the CDs. So again, it takes a team effort, but it can be done. You know, simple things like VAVs. You know, if you know how many you need, you know where they're going to be sizing. You can put early VAVs out. Those are those crazy lead items right now. So you know, if the mechanical engineer can help, you can put those out and bid those just as a purchase agreement.
They do that sometimes too. If you're going to wrap your jail in a pre-engineered metal building, and that might take a serious lead time to it, you can do an early release on that, signed off by the county to go out and start purchasing, having the fabrication created on that wraparound pre-engineered metal building, so that as you then design and build into the project, it's there in a timely fashion.
I can say this is becoming more of a rule versus the exception on a lot of projects, not just correctional, just across the board with our healthcare market. You brought a big one for pre-engineered metal buildings. You know, we're looking at 12-month lead items now. That's what they are. And again, you're a manufacturing facility, you got a new product line, and you need to be up and running with a pre-engineered building. And you know, we have to be the bearers of bad news and say, we can't even get your building for 12 months.
Yeah, it's an important part of the conversation that comes up early on too, because you'll have the debate between, well, is it pre-engineered metal building or is it precast? You know, it's precast panels. I don't even know what the lead times are on those right now, but they're pretty long, and so it's as much cost as it is availability that drives sort of the functionality and the design of your project. But it's availability of very scarce resources. But you know, it's not doomsday because you have this ability to be creative. And I will say that while things feel really expensive right now, I think the adage is still true. It's never going to be cheaper than it is right now to build, right? So by the time we finish this panel discussion, it's probably gone up 5%. I mean, we've been up here for a while.
How long have we been
up here?
up
I'm
here?
going to read this question, but I got a little distracted for a second. All right, let's go to one last question here, at least to the panel. If we have any more in the audience, that'd be great. And this goes across the board once again. So how does quality get evaluated when using a design assist? I think I'd like to have you guys explain it, like for the architects and for the counties. All right, so is it all just about, you know, because I think so many times everyone thinks it's got to be the low price, got to be the low price. But I know that you guys are across the board for the most part don't believe it has to be low price, it has to be best value. So how would you explain that to one of the counties like Coshocton County is looking at doing a new facility? How would you guys explain that if you were the CM either getting hired or wanting to get hired to the county? Sheriff's sitting right there, right? What would you tell them?
Well, I would say, as it relates to building a jail, you know, do your homework, you know, become really educated and don't necessarily just take our word for it, right? I mean, I know Steel Cell and Titan Door and some of these other companies will, upon request, allow you to come see their manufacturing and production facilities, and you can go make that evaluation firsthand for yourself, and I would encourage you to do that. I mean, I can sit here and tell you that building a jail with prefabricated modular steel cells like stacking Legos, and until you see it in the video, you're like, yeah, it really is, but what's really involved in it, and what's the difference between their steel box and a competitor's steel box? I think, you know, I can tell you what we've done on 16 counties in Indiana and what works, and all of those people are in this room for the most part, and they're out here under the tent, and they brought their product here so that you can touch it, feel it, and see it. But to me, there's no substitute for that. I mean, especially as a county commissioner, the building of a jail might be one of 20 issues on your agenda, right? You got a lot of other things to worry about. And so being able to make a quick evaluation on the products and the suppliers that are going to be involved in your project is pretty important. But you could take my word for it. I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be right. But I think go check it out and educate yourself is a big part of it.
I also think a lot of times people define value differently. So ask the question, what's important to that county? What's important to that sheriff? What's important to those county commissioners? So a lot of times I say you can tell how smart somebody is by the questions they ask rather than the answers they give. So ask the right questions, whether it be architect, engineers, as a CM, ask the right questions, help us define value with you, what's important to you, and then we can give better educated answers.
Yeah, and I explained earlier, about how we go and procure that and obtain some pricing components, and that's really just a check on making sure it's fair in the future when we negotiate a price. But it is important for the CM to help you define that value piece, because at some point, commissioners or somebody from the public perhaps is going to want to know what was the process that you went through to hire that team. And so, just on the evaluation side of it, it's important to check that. A lot of times, we go through the evaluations and we say, well, this is the best team, but then somebody puts together a spreadsheet and it's human nature to add numbers together and say, well, this person seems to be quote unquote low bid. And so, it is important for the team to define value a little bit and structure it in such a manner.
The low bid thing always, I'm reminded it was John Glenn, I think, was quoted as saying, as I hurtled through space, going through my mind was, I'm on a ship built by the lowest bidder. So quality matters.
It's a scary thought. No, but to your point, do your homework. I think the guys from Franklin County said it best. Go travel, go see the facilities, go check out what's working, what's not working, lessons learned, and just talk and ask those questions, because what is valuable to them may not be valuable to you, and that quality will show up based off of the performance the day you move into that facility and the day that facility comes into operation. And then that will be the lasting effect of what's in your mind when it's turned over, regardless of what was in the specifications and what was in that design. If it's not functioning how you need it to function, then it will always be a unfortunate bump in the road for you for the brand new facility that you just got turned over.
All right, do we have any more questions out in the audience? Melissa, we got we got two.
Hi, I'm Alan Renzi with Bowen Architects out of Cleveland. Anybody on the panel, if you could speak to the effect that design assist might have on a county's requirement for competitive bid. Does it help or hurt? And similarly, what effect does it have on hiring local?
Well,
Does it help or hurt?
I think there's a benefit in both arenas, right? Because one, to the first one about competitive pricing, right? I think it's important to bring on the design assist people in a value evaluation method. But then if that is open book, the benefit is these contractors can go to their vendors and get material pricing, equipment pricing that's 100% transparent. And what I think is good about that is if it's just we're going to take mechanical bids, for example, and we take lump sum mechanical bids, the owner doesn't get to necessarily see every time the value decision between am I going to get train or carrier equipment, right? There could be the owner's opinion could be, I really would like to have train and I would pay a slight increase to have train, but they never get to understand that information. All they know is carrier was who the contractor carried on bid day and that they were slightly lower, right? And so with the transparency of that, I think that the county gets to see those numbers and you can prove to a high level of transparency the competitive nature of putting that work in place. I think the same is true for engaging local contractors as well, is that if that's a goal of the county, which it almost always is, the contractors, especially like in the detention market where they have to travel, there's not many in the country, as you saw earlier, they do have the opportunity to and the time to seek some of that out to look for iron workers or carpenters in the area that they can engage and get involved in the project.
There was one other question. Sheriff, you had a question?
So you guys use CMC, BOT, CMA. To some of the folks in the audience, I think that would be foreign language. And I know there are advantages based on your state, on which one you pick. But the folks who aren't familiar with this, at the very beginning of this process, are going to need to familiarize themselves with it, because you're going to have to pick one of those. And some have advantages, especially to Joe's point, about being able to have a little more control over quality versus low bid. Can you give us I know we're running late, but the Cliff Notes version of maybe some of those so each person might understand what those delivery methods entail in like the 30,000-foot view?
Well, yeah, you did it justice by even denoting that in Indiana we call it CMC, right? Which is, people are like, what's the C stand for? What's construction management as constructor? And they're like, what the heck does that mean? And really what it is construction management at risk. And people say, well, why don't you just call it construction management at risk? I'm like, I'm not a member of the General Assembly. I don't know why they call it that. So, but I think there are a lot of different options. And to Larry's comment earlier, you know, they all have their pluses and minuses, and some, it really depends on where you are as a particular county, what your capacities are. You know, I listened to the Franklin County folks up here that have sounds like a pretty decent bench of folks that can be hands-on, but some counties don't have that. So picking the right delivery method is important, but to answer your question more directly, a CM at risk model is exactly what it sounds like. The construction manager takes the risk, bonds the entire job in Indiana, and signs all the contracts, whereas a construction manager's advisor, you, the county, will hold the contracts and deal with any challenges that might come from subcontracting partners. And then you said build, operate, transfer, BOT, which is a sort of a public-private partnership that's been codified in Indiana law, that takes more of a developer-led role and a financing role, and your public bidding requirement is not necessary or included per se in the project. And then there's the old design bid build, which is you hire an architect, they design it, you put it out on the street, and it's like playing craps, you know. You just hope you get what you bargain for. That has a GMP too. We joke about guaranteed maximum price. In Indiana, I refer to design bid build as a place where a guaranteed minimum price occurs, right? And it's only going to go up from there. So, you know, they all have their different advantages and disadvantages. The size of the project, the complexity, what your capacities are as a county, I think all of that plays into picking the right one.